In 1973, a woman named Man Chen arrived in San Francisco with $40, a single suitcase, and a clay pot wrapped in a sweater so it would not break. She had no English. She had no job. She had that pot. That pot is number 1 on this list. Number 12 cost less than 30 cents to make and fed 4 people through a Tuesday. Number 7 was so looked down on that families in Guangdong province refused to admit they ate it. Now, this is not medical advice, and I am not telling you to change what you eat. Hi, my name is Jason, and this is Lost Asian Foods. Music, subscribe, and stay with me. Here are 25 forgotten Chinese one-pot meals immigrants relied on every week. Number 25, congee music juke. Your grandmother did not call it rice porridge. She called it juke. And she made it when there was nothing else. And when there was plenty, and when someone was sick, music. And when someone was sad, and sometimes just because it was Tuesday, 1 cup of rice, 10 cups of water, a piece of music ginger. That was the whole recipe. The rice broke down over 90 minutes into a thick, silky porridge that stretched 1 bowl of grain into 6 bowls of food. In Guangdong and Fujian provinces in the 1960s, juk was the morning meal, the sick day meal, and the end-of-month meal when the money had run out before the calendar did. For a Chinese immigrant family in a Chinatown apartment in 1975, juk was the pot that never fully emptied. You added water, you added heat. It kept going. A bag of broken rice cost 40. Broken rice, the pieces too small and irregular for the restaurant trade. The ones nobody wanted, cooked faster and made a creamier juk than whole grain. Your grandmother knew that. She bought the broken rice on purpose. Number 24. Soy sauce chicken rice. Yao choy gifon. 1 whole chicken, soy, music sauce, rock sugar, star anise, ginger, ammo, or baso acid. That was the entire grocery list. And if your grandmother was the kind of woman who wrote grocery lists, which she was not, that is what it would have said. The chicken went in whole and simmered music for 40 minutes in that dark, sweet, fragrant broth until the skin turned the color of mahogany. And the whole apartment smelled like something worth coming home to. Then you turned the heat, music off, and left it in the liquid for another 20 minutes to finish cooking in the residual heat, because your grandmother understood patience music as a cooking technique before any culinary school thought to put it in a curriculum. That patience music was the whole recipe. The broth became the sauce. The sauce went over rice. A whole chicken in 1978 cost about $1.20 at the Chinatown Music Wet Market, and it fed a family of 4 for 2 days, music running. On the 3rd day, the bones went back into the pot with water and ginger and became soup. Nothing left that kitchen wasted. Not a single bone, not a single drop of broth. That is not frugality. That is a philosophy. Number 23. Tofu and preserved vegetable soup. Dufu mei chai tang. A block of soft tofu cost 15. A handful of mai, the salted and sun-dried mustard greens that your grandmother kept in a ceramic jar on the counter, cost almost nothing because she made them herself from greens she bought music cheap at the end of market day. The tofu went in last. Music dropped gently into the simmering broth so it would not break. The mai gave the soup a deep, funky, slightly sour flavor that no fresh vegetable could replicate. The flavor was music, the taste of Hakka cooking, the taste of people who had been moving and surviving for centuries, and who knew that preserved food traveled better than music, fresh, and lasted longer than pride. Number music 22, pork and salted fish, clay pot rice, xian yu roa zan. Here is where the clay pot becomes the whole point. If you have never cooked in one, I need you to understand that this is not a preference or a tradition or a nostalgic music quirk. It is a different category of cooking entirely. Cold cooked rice, a piece of salted fish the size of your palm, a few slices of pork belly marinated in soy sauce and sesame oil. Everything goes into the clay pot over low heat. Then the lid goes on. And here is the part that music matters. You do not open it. You do not check it. You do not lift the lid just a little to see what is happening. You wait and you trust the pot because the clay music pot has been doing this longer than you have been alive, and it does not need your supervision. The rice on the bottom develops a crust over that low, steady heat. A golden, smoky, slightly crispy layer that Cantonese families have been arguing over at the dinner table for generations. That crust is called the fan ju, and it is the music best part of the entire meal. No factory, no rice cooker, no nonstick pan, no modern shortcut of any kind can produce music it. Only the clay pot and the patience to leave it completely alone. Number 21, egg drop tomato soup. Fan Kia Dan Huang. 2 tomatoes, 2 eggs, water, and salt. That is the entire grocery list. If you are skeptical that 4 ingredients can produce something worth writing about, sit with that skepticism for a moment because you are wrong. The tomatoes are cut into wedges and cooked in a little oil until they collapse into a bright, almost violent red sauce that smells like summer, no matter what month it is. Then water goes in and comes to a boil. The eggs are beaten and poured in slowly while you stir so they form soft, silky ribbons through the broth, like something a much more complicated recipe would be proud of. The whole pot takes 12 minutes and music costs 20. In Shanghai and across the Yangtze music river delta in the 1970s, this was the weekend night soup that appeared on every single table, whether the family was doing well or doing badly that week, because some weeks you could not always tell the difference anyway. It was the great equalizer, the soup that asked no questions and needed no explanation. Number 20, peanut and pork bone soup, Huang Jugu Tang, raw peanuts, pork bones, water, a few dates, a piece of dried tangerine peel, everything into the pot at once. Then you waited at least 3 hours. The peanuts softened until they were almost creamy. The marrow came out of the bones and made the broth rich and slightly thick. The dates gave a faint sweetness you might not notice unless you knew it was there. In Guangdong province, this soup was medicine, not metaphorical medicine, actual medicine. The dried tangerine peel was believed to support digestion. The peanuts were believed to nourish the blood. Your grandmother did not have a pharmacist. She had this soup and she made it every single week. Number 19, winter melon and pork soup. Donggua Ruen. Winter melon looks like a problem. It is enormous and pale green, covered in a white, waxy bloom, and most people in a Western grocery store walked past it without a second look. Your grandmother walked straight to it. Winter melon cost almost nothing because nobody else wanted it. She bought a wedge, peeled it, cut it into cubes, and dropped it into a pot with pork ribs, water, and a slice of ginger. The melon cooked down into something almost translucent, music, soft and delicate. It absorbed the flavor of the pork and gave the broth a clean, slightly sweet music quality that made it one of the most refreshing soups on a hot day. Cheap, cooling, medicinal. Your grandmother called it supper. A nutritionist today would charge $60 to tell you to eat it. Number 18, music, red bean, and lotus seed sweet soup. Honggu Lin Zitang. This one is technically dessert. I am putting it here anyway because in a Chinese immigrant household in the 1970s, the line between dessert, music, and dinner was not always a line. Sometimes it was the whole meal. Red beans soaked music overnight. Lotus seeds, rock sugar. The beans simmered for 2 hours until they were completely soft and the broth turned a deep reddish purple. Rock sugar music dissolved at the end. You ate it warm in a bowl, sometimes cold from the refrigerator the next day. It cost maybe 30 cents for a pot that served 6. In traditional Chinese medicine, red beans were believed to reduce dampness, music, in the body. Lotus seeds were believed to calm the mind. Whether that is true or not, a warm bowl of hung music at 9 at night does something to the nervous system that no Western medicine has successfully patented yet. Number 17, braced pork belly, hong shu. Pork belly was the cheap music cut. The butcher in the Chinatown market in 1968 would sell it for almost nothing because the restaurant music trade wanted lean pork and the American customers did not know what to do with fat. Your grandmother knew exactly what to do with fat. She cut it into thick squares, browned music it in the pot, then added soy sauce, rice wine, rock sugar, and water, and turned the music heat down low. Then she left it for 2 hours. The fat rendered music slowly into the braising liquid. The pork turned the color of dark amber. The sugar caramelized into a lacquer that coated every piece. 1 pound of pork belly became a pot of something so rich and deep and gelatinous music that you could eat it over rice for 3 days and feel that you had eaten well every single time. Number 16, salted egg and pork patty steamed over music rice. Ham dan jing yuk bang. This is the meal that every single music Cantonese immigrant over the age of 50 remembers. I want to be clear about that. Every single one. Ground pork is mixed with cornstarch, soy, music sauce, and sesame oil. It is pressed flat into a patty on a plate. A salted duck egg is cracked over the top. Then the whole plate is set inside the rice music cooker on top of the rice to steam as the rice cooks. The steam from the rice cooks the pork. The yolk from the salted did egg runs into the pork fat. Everything goes over the rice. 1 pot, 1 burner, 1 meal that takes music 0 extra effort because the rice is cooking anyway. That efficiency is not laziness. That is genius. That is a woman with 4 music children, 1 burner, and 30 minutes figuring out physics. Number 15, lotus root and pork rib, music soup. Leon Upai Guten. Lotus root is another vegetable that the Western grocery store ignores. It is brown and knobby on the outside. When you slice it, the inside reveals a pattern of holes arranged like a flower. It is one of the most beautiful things in any produce section, and almost nobody in a Western supermarket knows what it is. Your grandmother knew. She bought it cheap because of that ignorance. Lotus music root simmered with pork ribs for 2 hours turned from something starchy and bland into something soft, slightly sweet, and deeply music satisfying. The ribs gave body to the broth and the lotus root absorbed music it. A pot of this soup cost under $1 in 1972, and it appeared on the table at least once a week in every Cantonese household that music had a grandmother who knew what she was doing. All of them did. Number 14, steamed fish with ginger and scallion, Qingjiang Yu. 1 whole fish, a tilapia, a carp, whatever was swimming in the tank at the Chinatown fish market that morning. The fish was cleaned, scored across the body in 3 cuts on each side, and placed on a plate with ginger slices inside the cavity. Then it was steamed over boiling water for 8 to 10 minutes, not a single minute more, because overcooked steamed fish is a tragedy that your grandmother would not allow in her kitchen. Then hot oil sizzling and spitting was poured directly music over the fish and a handful of fresh scallions. That sound, that sizzle, music, was the signal that dinner was ready. The whole fish cost 60. The technique, music, cost nothing. What you got was the purest possible expression of a single ingredient treated with complete respect. Number 13, watercress and pork bone soup, Shangkaiju Gu Tang. Watercress grew in the water. It required no music soil, no tending, no purchase if you knew where a stream ran clean enough. In Hong Kong's new territories in the 1950s, families gathered it wild. In San Francisco in the 1970s, a bunch of watercresses at the Chinatown market cost 20. Pork bones cost almost nothing because the butcher sold them by weight and they were mostly bone. Together, they went into a pot with water and 3 dates and simmered for 2 hours into a music, slightly bitter, deeply mineral broth that your grandmother swore could fix anything. A cough, a fever, a broken heart. The bitterness of the watercress did music something to the richness of the pork that balanced everything. It was one of those combinations that seemed accidental until you realized it had been refined over 500 years. Number 12, tofu skin and mushroom clay pot, Fuju Shangguba. Dried tofu skin, the sheets that form on the surface of heated soy milk and are lifted off and dried, cost almost nothing. A packet lasted for weeks in the cupboard. Dried shiitake mushrooms cost almost nothing and lasted indefinitely. Together, rehydrated and braised in soy sauce, oyster sauce, and a little sugar in the clay pot over low heat, they became something that tasted music expensive. The tofu skin absorbed the braising liquid, and music turned silky and rich. The mushrooms gave a deep, woodsy flavor that anchored the whole pot. It was the vegetarian dish families without meat relied on, and it was what meat-eating families served when the paycheck was short. Both ate it without complaint because it tasted music like something worth sitting down for. Number 11, Cantonese beef brisket stew, music nalam. The brisket was the cut nobody wanted. Tough, full of connective tissue, requiring hours of heat before it surrendered. Your grandmother wanted it specifically for those reasons. She paid less for it, music, and she knew what heat and time could do. The brisket went into the pot with chuha paste, music, fermented bean curd, star anise, dried tangerine peel, and water, and then it simmered for 3 music hours minimum. The connective tissue broke down into gelatine that made the braising liquid thick and glossy. The beef became tender enough to cut with a spoon. A pound of brisket in 1979 cost $60. After 3 hours, it had become something a restaurant in Hong Kong would put on a menu for 20 times that price. Your grandmother was not running a restaurant, she was running a household. Same result, lower overhead. Music, number 10, pork and century egg congee, pansuro. Yes, we are back to congee, I know. But this version deserves its own entry because the century egg changes everything. The century egg is preserved in a mixture of clay and ash until the white turns translucent black and the yolk turns music, dark green. The whole egg can smell so strong that non-Chinese friends might leave the room. When that egg is dropped into plain juke and paired with silky shreds of poached pork, it becomes one of the most complex and comforting bowls in the entire Chinese culinary tradition. The preserved egg gives a creamy, intensely savory depth. The pork is gentle and clean. The juke holds everything together. This was the congee your grandmother made when someone in the house was sick and needed to be music brought back. It worked not because of magic, because of protein and warmth and being handed a bowl by music, someone who cared enough to stand at the stove. Number 9, spare ribs and black music bean sauce clay pot. Doai pai gua. Fermented music black beans are the funkiest thing in a Chinese pantry, and I mean that as the highest possible compliment. Music. They smell like something that has been left in a jar for a long time, because they have fermented, salted, aged, mashed with garlic and ginger and a little oil. They become a paste that does something to pork that nothing else on earth can replicate. Spare ribs are cut into small pieces, marinated in that black bean paste with oyster music sauce and a little sugar, then steamed or braised in the clay pot until they are completely tender. The sauce caramelizes slightly at the edges of the clay pot. The ribs release their fat into the sauce. You eat it over rice and you use the last of the rice to clean the pot because leaving any of that sauce behind was not something your grandmother would have permitted. Number 8, music pork and Napa cabbage glass noodle soup by Cayenne Shang glass noodles. Mung, music bean threads. They looked like nothing in the dry package, clear and brittle and weightless. Music dropped into simmering broth with Napa cabbage and sliced pork. They swelled and music softened into something slippery and satisfying that absorbed every flavor. Music they touched. Napa cabbage cost almost nothing. Glass noodles cost almost nothing. Pork shoulder music sliced thin cost maybe 50 cents for enough to feed a family of 4. The whole pot came together, music, in 20 minutes, which made this the weekend night emergency meal. The meal you made when it was 8 mouths music, and everyone was hungry and nobody had planned anything. There was always music cabbage. There was always a handful of glass noodles in the cupboard. There was always a music way. Number 7, salted fish and pork congee. Xian Yuo Zhou. This is the one families in Guangdong did not music talk about outside the house. Salted fish had a reputation. Music. The smell was aggressive. If your windows were open when you cooked it, the neighbors knew. In the resettlement housing blocks of Hong Kong in the 1960s, music, the smell of salted fish cooking, meant a family was poor and everyone in the building knew it. The shame music was so strong that some families stopped making it entirely after they had enough money to music buy something else. What nobody said then, and what I am saying now, is that salted fish and pork congee music is extraordinary. The fish dissolved into the juke and gave it a deeply savory mineral intensity. The pork music balanced the salt. A small piece of salted fish cost almost nothing and transformed an entire pot. The shame was never justified. The fish was music, right? Number 6, bitter melon and pork rib soup. Kugwa paguten. Bitter melon tastes like its name. There is no softening that statement. It is bitter in the music way that medicine is bitter. The way the first cup of black coffee you ever drank was bitter. The music way your body recognizes something serious is happening. Paired with pork ribs in a clear broth and with a few dates to cut the edge, it becomes something not pleasant. Music, in the conventional sense, but deeply, completely satisfying. It can take a few meals of eating it to understand. In traditional Chinese medicine, bitter melon was used to manage blood sugar and reduce internal heat. Whether those claims hold under clinical scrutiny or not, the fact is the Chinese grandmothers were feeding this soup to their families for 1,000 music years before anyone invented a glucose monitor. Number 5, braised peanuts with star anise, lu hua. This one will surprise you because it is not a soup music, and it is not a main course, and it is not a meal in the conventional sense. Music. It is a pot of raw peanuts, still in their skins, braced slowly in water with soy music sauce, star anise, cinnamon, bay leaves, and music salt, until they are completely soft and infused with that deep-spiced braising liquid. In the tea houses of Guangzhou in the 1950s, a music small dish of lu hua appeared on every table before anything music else was ordered. They cost almost nothing. They kept your hands busy and music your stomach quiet while the real food was coming. For immigrant families who could not afford a tea house, the pod of braised music peanuts sat on the counter, and you ate them whenever hunger came, morning or night, standing music at the counter or at the table, alone or with everyone. Number 4, lion's head meatballs in clear broth. Music Qingdunzito. The name comes from the shape. Large, loose pork meatballs made with water chestnuts, ginger, and rice wine simmer gently in a clear broth with napa cabbage until the cabbage is silky, and the meatballs have given everything they had to the surrounding liquid. This was the dish for a special occasion that was also not a special occasion. A birthday, nobody had money to celebrate music properly. A visit from a relative, a Sunday when everyone was home. The meatballs are large, one per person. Music, and that formality, the single meatball in each bowl of broth, makes the meal feel ceremonial, even though the total cost was under $2. Your grandmother understood that ceremony does not require money. It requires presentation and intention and the willingness to make something that takes slightly more time than Tuesday usually allows. Number 3, dried oyster music and black moss soup. Fakai hasitang. This soup is eaten at Lunar New Year, and the reason is in the name. Fakai music. The black moss sounds in Cantonese like fakai, meaning to prosper. Hosi music. The dried oyster sounds like haushi, meaning good things. You were not just eating a soup. Music. You were eating a sentence, a wish spoken in ingredients. Pork bones for the base. Dried oysters rehydrated and simmered for hours. Black moss stirred in at the end, a little oyster sauce, a little soy sauce. The whole pot smelled like the ocean and tasted like the hope that the next music year would be better than the last one. For an immigrant family in 1972, music who had left everything behind and was starting from nothing, that hope was not a small music thing to put in a bowl. It was the whole point of the meal. Number 2, steamed spare ribs with taro in a clay pot. Taro yupai gu. Taro is another vegetable that the Western produce music section treats like a problem. It is rough-skinned, brown, and waxy. And it has a mildly toxic skin that requires gloves to peel, unless your hands are too callous to music notice, which your grandmothers were. Peeled and cubed. Taro cooked in the clay pot with spare music ribs in a sauce of fermented bean curd, oyster sauce, and sesame music oil until the taro absorbed the fat from the pork and became something creamy and rich and completely music, unlike anything else. The outside of each taro cube stayed slightly firm. The inside turned almost molten. The spare ribs fell apart. The clay pot held all of it together in a sauce that had reduced and concentrated over 90 minutes into something that required no explanation to anyone who had grown up eating it. It explained itself. The first bite said everything. Number 1, cured pork sausage and rice in a clay pot. Lang Bao XY fan. Man Chen's clay pot. The one wrapped in a sweater. The one that survived the flight from Hong Kong to San Francisco in 1973. She used it every single week for 30 music years. 2 links of lap chong, the sweet, fatty, red-tinged cured pork sausage that hung in the window of every Chinatown butcher shop. Rinsed rice-soaked music for 20 minutes. Everything into the clay pot with water, the lid on low heat. You did not music touch it. You let the pot do what the pot knew how to do. As the rice cooked, the sausage released its fat, music, and its sweetness into the grains below. The bottom layer of rice developed the music crust. The fanju, the part the children always fought over, the sausage sliced on the bias over the top of the finished rice, a drizzle of soy sauce and sesame oil, and that music was the meal. 30 cents of ingredients in 1973. A complete meal, music for 2 people. An act of love performed music in a kitchen the size of a hallway by a woman who had music $40 in her pocket and every intention of surviving. The clay pot is not in any museum. Music. It is in a cupboard somewhere in the Richmond district of San Francisco, or in a kitchen in Flushing, New York, or in a drawer in Vancouver's East Side. Passed down or forgotten or sitting unused because the grandmother who used it is gone, and nobody thought music to ask her how. That is why we are here. That is why this channel exists. Because the Lap Chung Bao fan that Munch Chen made every week for 30 years deserves to music be remembered. Because the woman who wrapped a clay pot in a sweater and carried it across an ocean deserves to be known. Make one of these this week. Music, just one. Buy a piece of lap chong from a Chinese grocery store. Buy a music clay pot if you do not have one. They cost $12. Rinse your rice, put it all in the pot, turn the heat on low. Music, walk away. Let the pot do what it has always done. Do not music eat from a plastic container tonight. Sit down at the table, not the music couch. Set a bowl. Use chopsticks or a spoon or your hands. I don't care. Jason doesn't judge. Eat slowly because these meals were never about being cheap. They were about being alive in a country that did not always make that easy. They were about a woman in a music small kitchen saying with 1 pot, 1 burner, and 1 hour that her music family was worth feeding something real. Tell me in the comments which music of these 25 meals your family still makes. Tell me if your grandmother had a clay pot. Tell me if anyone else's popo made kanji at midnight, music for no reason, except that someone looked like they needed it. Because these are not just recipes. They are proof that a music woman with $40 in a clay pot wrapped in a sweater can build something worth remembering. The pot was never just a pot. It was the whole story.